part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to another Reghi Roda podcast powered by Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Shout out to our fantabulous producer, the man who makes it all go right to make sure all of you out there in the podcatosphere hear us. And with our special guest, you're not going to want to miss today's show. So thank you, Cordts, for getting this out to everybody. And Michael Reghi, I'll turn things over to you to introduce our very special guest here this evening.
Special guest to be sure, Kenny. Longtime friend and one of the very best. In fact, I might be a little bit biased because I've known the man for just a few decades, but I think he is the preeminent analyst in all of college football. His Phil Steele College Football Preview magazine is over 350 pages of the best you're going to find. And I mean anywhere around the college game. He does it year in and year out. He's put in his, his normal 8+ months of 7 days a week, about 15 to 18 hours a day. And Phil, you still sound very fresh and energetic, buddy. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Michael. And I am very energetic. It's my fun time of year. I get to do maybe 6 to 8 radio shows a day, down to working maybe 50, 60 hours a week. So it's like being on vacation right now.
Yeah, that's on vacation. Hey, nobody is as thorough as Phil Steele. You want to know everything and anything about your college football team? This is the magazine to get. This is the man to talk to, and that's why we wanted to get him on here. So, Reds, let's get it rocking and rolling with the legend Phil Steele and his 2024 magazine. I'll let you have first dibs on where you want to go.
Well, one of the things, and maybe the top thing that I love about Phil, is he puts it all out there, and he will put a power poll up, just like you'll see in this 2024 Phil Steele's College Football Preview Edition. Now, the top 40 he'll put up. And, Phil, I just want to make sure this is based on where you believe teams will finish the 24 season, not how you rank them talent-wise going in, correct?
That's right. My top 40, and I'll give you a prime example of that, guys. Oklahoma this year. If you look at my power poll, which is where I rate the teams talent-wise, I actually have Oklahoma number 7, most talented team in the country. But then you look at my preseason top 40, and I've got a number 20. You might be scratching your head a little bit, but a lot of it comes down to schedule. And when you look at Oklahoma this year, they actually draw the SEC's toughest schedule. They might face 5 potential top 10 teams this year. They have to play Mississippi on the road, Texas in Dallas, Missouri on the road. They play Alabama at home. And they also have to play LSU in Death Valley. Those are 5 really tough games. Doesn't even include Tennessee. So they've got the toughest SEC schedule. And due to the schedule, I have them number 20, but number 7 in my power poll, which is their overall talent for the year.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. And Kenny, let's get this rolling.
Yeah.
Because you and I have on our R&R podcast, we have an abundance, hundreds, thousands of Ohio State Buckeye football fans here that are connected with us in R&R. Phil's got Ohio State ranked number 2 in this 2024 power poll. Georgia's number 1. All right, Phil, let me start here. Ryan Day is 56-8. 56-8 in his 6 years as the head coach of this Buckeye football team. Yet, is it fair to say his seat's a little bit warm? He's under fire a little bit. No Big Ten title since 2020, but more importantly, probably the 3 consecutive losses to Michigan, where the Wolverines have averaged 39 points per game in the 3 beatings of the Buckeyes. How hot, in your mind, Phil, is his seat if a 4th consecutive loss to Michigan would occur?
Yeah, and, I've heard some people say it's national championship or bust, but I disagree. I really think It is beat Michigan or bust. If he gets a fourth straight loss to Michigan, I don't think Ryan Day's the head coach at Ohio State anymore, despite the record. They need to beat Michigan. When they get to the playoff, we all know Ohio State's going to make the playoff this year. They've got to win a game or two, at least. I don't think they have to win the national championship, but beat Michigan, win a couple of games in the playoff, and everything's fine for Ryan Day. But lose to Michigan, there's no way he survives four straight losses to Michigan.
Here's the only way, Phil, I think that happens, because a couple of years ago, they lost to Michigan and should have beat Georgia. And if they did, they would have been national champs. And I'll take that over a win over Michigan any day of the week. Give me a national championship over a win over Michigan. I'm sorry, I'm not as old school as 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I want the title, not the win in the gold pants over Michigan. So should they lose to Michigan but still find a way to win a national title, I think he keeps his job. But if they lose to Michigan and for the third straight year, Phil Steele, lose the bowl game, meaning they went 0-2 in their last 2 games in 3 consecutive years, then for sure they're looking for a new head coach.
I agree with you 100%, Kenny. If he loses to Michigan and wins the national championship, yeah, all is forgiven. But that would take a lot, I think, if he loses to Michigan to get through the playoff and get to the national title. But I agree with you 100% there, Kenny. You make a great point.
Bill, let's look at this Ohio State offense. Let's start right there, okay? As we're assessing and evaluating this football team, I think a lot would say you did right up top when analyzing quarterbacks for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Had the best quarterback in the Big Ten 9 of the last 12 years. Kyle McCord last year, I thought he was very good. And yet, of course, didn't play terribly in Ann Arbor. But, maybe it was more the defense's fault. But McCord put up 24 points and came away with that third straight loss. So now we're talking about Will Howard, huh? Give us your assessment of Will Howard, who came in from Kansas State and now looks like we'll let you say it. Do you think he's going to hold off the 2 talented, your VHTs, very highly touted quarterbacks, the youngsters, and Julian Sayin and Air Noland?
Yeah, I do think Will Howard opens up the season as the starter for Ohio State, beats out Devin Brown, Julian Sayin, and Air Noland, all 3 of them. But the thing I like is in a Chip Kelly offense, they like to move and run the quarterback, and they have that possibility here. Now, if you had a system where you had one running quarterback and a couple of pocket passers or a couple of inexperienced players that you didn't trust behind them, you wouldn't run them as much. But I think you can run Will Howard because you've got a Devin Brown, because you've got a Julian Sayin, because you have an Air Noland behind him. You're able to take an injury. And Will Howard's at his best when running the ball. Remember, he led Kansas State to the Big 12 title a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. He probably would have lost his job at Kansas State this year. That's a little bit of a concern, but I do think he's a good fit for the Chip Kelly offense. And I do like the depth they have at quarterback in the Chip Kelly offense. And frankly, whichever one of the 4 is on the field, I think Ohio State fans can feel pretty good.
My concern with the offense, Phil, is the offensive line. Where do you have them ranked as far as your units in the offensive line for the Buckeyes?
Yeah, I think they will be better on the offensive line this year. They bring in Alabama's center, Seth McLaughlin. And overall, you look at they've got 4 starters back basically this year, 15 VHTs in the unit. I agree with you, Kenny. I have not been blown away by the offensive line. In fact, I'm the only member of the Joe Moore Award Committee that is not an ex-offensive lineman or an ex-offensive line coach. Very proud to be there. And in on the Joe Moore Award committees, they sort of criticized the Ohio State offensive line the last couple of years. And I agree with them 100%. But I think this year's offensive line will be better. I don't think it's dominant, but I do have them rated actually all the way up at number 12 in the country, which is pretty good considering what we've seen the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's an improvement. Not where I need it to be as a Buckeye fan. I'm used to better offensive lines than that, and that's why Michigan's kicked their ass over the last 3 years, Phil. So I hope it gets into the top 10 before the season's over. But then you flip the script, Phil, on that defensive line with all the NIL money they've been throwing around with Sawyer and Tuamaloau and the guys. That's got to be one of the top units in the country, doesn't it?
Yeah, my number 1 rated defensive line in the country. Now, frankly, for all the talent they have on the defensive line, Kenny, I would like to have seen more production the last 2 years. I mean, last year, the Buckeyes had just 28 sacks all year, gave up 3.4 yards per carry. I think this year they finally live up to their talent billing. And these are guys that are bound and determined. They could have gone to the NFL. Tuamola, Sawyer could all have gone. Tyler Williams for gone to the NFL. They all opted to return. I think they all have a big final season here at Ohio State, and they have the best defensive line play they've had in a couple of years. They need to live up to all this preseason hype because, frankly, I don't think they did last year.
Phil Steele joining us. Phil, right. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can get in on your 2024 Phil Steele College Football Preview and the easiest and most efficient way for them to get your magazine.
I appreciate that, Michael. Well, the best and quickest way to get it, don't drive around the city looking for it. We used to be everywhere, Walmarts, grocery stores, places like that. We are exclusively at two places, Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. They have plenty of them on stock. They're open right now, or not open right now, but they're available right now at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So if you want the magazine and you want it in the next hour or so, go to Barnes & Noble, go to Books A Million and get it. Now, if you don't want to drive out and get it, you can order it online at philsteele.com. And we're going to charge you a shipping charge. I mean, it costs to ship things, but what we do is we give you the digital magazine absolutely free. And the digital magazine, we update all the way through September. As an example, looks like Utah State's going to lose their head coach, Blake Anderson. We'll have that updated in the digital version. Won't, of course, be updated in the hard copy. So either way to get it, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com.
If you're a serious college football fan, I think, Kenny, you'll concur with, got to have it. I mean, you got to have it. If you don't, you're playing from behind in the fourth quarter with not a big chance to win the football game. So make sure, as you said, as Phil just said, with Barnes & Noble and the other, Phil, again, you said Books A Million?
Books A Million. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million.
Okay, outstanding. Make sure, again, you won't be prepared for the 2024 football season without it. Phil Steele, our guest here on our Reghi Roda podcast, is a college football season. We're in July now. I'm excited as hell because, Kenny, it's probably it's my favorite time of year, the football season, college football and NFL. Phil, one area, the one position group of the Ohio State program I really like is that running back room, and Travion Henderson has now been joined by a young man, Quinshon Judkins. Judkins is for real. He's an outstanding running back. Let all of our listeners know what Judkins is all about as he joins Travion Henderson. What, you tell him, could be one of the top running back contingents in college football, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The Henderson-Judkins combo is number one in the country. I would like to see a little more depth. I mean, you get to number 3, James Peoples is my number 5 rated running back out of high school. Number 4 is Sam Williams-Dixon, who is only my number 48 rated running back out of high school. And then you get to a walk-on in T.C. Caffey. So a little concerned about the depth, especially with the fact Henderson was banged up last year. And Judkins was not 100% at the start of last year. Now, 2 years ago at Ole Miss, he rushed for 1,567 yards, 5.7 yards per carry. The guy was dynamic, looked like an All-American coming into the season, got off to a slow start last year, but then he came on as the season went, did get to the 1,000-yard marker, but only averaged 4.3 yards per carry. If Judkins is 100% healthy, Henderson's 100% healthy all year, I think Ohio State's in great shape. They got the best set of running backs in the country. If both get banged up, I'm a little concerned about the depth, but overall, that's a dynamic duo right there in Henderson and Judkins.
All right, so the Buckeyes, for me, Phil, it's national championship or bust. That's the way I'm looking at it. With all the money they spent in NIL dollars, you got Chip Kelly in now running the offense. Ryan Day's good buddy, right? They get the transfer quarterback they need and everything. So it's national championship or bust for me. Who is their biggest threat in the Big Ten this year? Because I'm looking at that October 12th game on the road in Oregon as a team that stands out to me. Are they the biggest threat, or is it somebody else?
I think it's definitely Oregon this year. And when you look at the Ducks, Dan Lanning's been doing a great job building this team. Cristobal built it from where they were prior to him, and then Lanning stepped in, had good talent, and he's now built upon it. And he's brought in some key players at numerous spots along the team to go along with all the talent they have. I'll give you an example. Look at the quarterback situation. Last year, Bo Nix had a phenomenal year. Nix had 45 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, threw for 4,500 yards, hit 77% of his passes. Now, Dylan Gabriel is a guy that when I talked to Coach Lanning, went over the team with them, he said he's a lot like Bo Nix. Very savvy, very pleased with him. He's got confidence. He can get coached hard. He's got a great attitude. And last year at Oklahoma, he had 30 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. So he fits the offense well. It's a quarterback-friendly offense. They've got my best set of receivers in the country. It was real tight. Oregon, Ohio State, 1-2, 1-2. The Ducks really have an outstanding receiving core in it. I think the big thing was tight end. They've got Terrence Ferguson, a potential All-American tight end. Ohio State doesn't have that at tight end. They also have plenty of talent at the receiver position and add in an Evan Stewart. The offensive line is solid, running back solid. Defensively, Dan Lanning knows defense and has built this thing up well. They've got my number 7 linebackers, number 11 DBs. And Autzen Stadium is one of the toughest venues to play. I know it's only 54,000, but this place gets extremely loud and all game long. In fact, in Autzen Stadium, the last 5 years, they've lost a grand total of 1 game. So they generally don't lose at home. They get Ohio State at home. And that is, to me, the biggest threat on Ohio State's schedule this year. Second biggest threat would be Penn State, but that's a team Ohio State has played and conquered in the past. So I'm going to go with the Ducks as the main competition this year.
Yeah, Phil, I mean, the 2 losses last year, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm doing this, both to Washington, right? And both by a field goal, right?
Had a chance to win both games.
Yeah.
1 play away in both games. And now the knock on Dan Lanning, I just did a show out there in Oregon today. The knock on Dan Lanning is can't win the big one. You know, we've heard that from about coaches before, but he's lost to Washington 3 straight years, and you change 1 play in each of those 3 games and they win. A couple of 4th down stops late in the game have cost them. I think they do break through this year. Watch out for the Ducks. They're an outstanding team.
Last thing before we get our break in here, Phil, about the Big Ten. Obviously, a new era, right? As you add UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington to the Big Ten. Just your thoughts on those 4 teams coming in and how you think that will affect the Big Ten, which I don't know why it's called the Big Ten anymore, but this year and in the future.
Well, first of all, I've never predicted a doggone 18-team conference before. You're only talking about 9 possible outcomes of records, and you got 18 teams to fit into that sled. But I digress. Let's talk about the 4 teams as you asked, Eddie. I think 2 of them are going to struggle, and those 2 would be UCLA and Washington. UCLA's got a brutal schedule, one of the toughest in the Big Ten, and Washington just had everything go right last year. They had a lot of close wins, 2 close wins over Oregon, as Michael pointed out. A lot of close wins last year, late coaching changed, a lot of players left. They only have 6 starters back. They're number 132 on my experience chart. They go from playing in a national title game to fighting to get to a bowl game this year, I think, for Washington. So I think those 2 teams struggle. Now, the 2 teams I think will do well, we talked about Oregon in length. The other one is USC. And the big thing I want you to watch with USC this year is the knock on USC in the last couple of years under Lincoln Riley has clearly been the defense. But they bring in Danton Lee from UCLA, and he brought over 3 of his starters. They bring in an Oregon State starter. They bring in a Vanderbilt starter. His defense is much improved. Miller Moss had 6 touchdowns in the bowl game. I think he's going to be the next great quarterback for Lincoln Riley. And they're going to have the offense. The defense has improved. I think they topped last year's 8-win total. I don't put them in the same role as Oregon as a contender in the Big Ten. But keep your eyes on USC. They're going to have a good year this year.
All right. I lied. One last thing on the Big Ten after those 4 teams. What about Sharon Moore taking over for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines, defending national champs, undefeated last year, but a ton of guys off to the NFL, record-setting guys in the draft, and Harbaugh leaves and Moore takes over?
Yeah, and a lot of folks say, hey, Moore was a head coach for a couple of games last year, but keep in mind, those games, Jim Harbaugh was the coach during the week. He just wasn't there on game day. Now Moore's got to have the team the entire time. They also, as you mentioned, Kenny, lost so much talent. And last year, one of the reasons Michigan won the national title, They were one of the most experienced teams in the country, number 7 on my experience chart. This year, number 117. And they've got the big questions to me, not on defense. I have no questions about Michigan's defense. That's one of the best in the country. Offensive line, you lose all 5 starters. And who the heck is the quarterback? Is it Orgy? Is it Warren? Is it Tuttle? Is it Denigal? Who knows? And whoever wins the job, is he a capable starter? Orgy's got throwing questions. Warren is a capable passer, not a dangerous runner. Tuttle might be the best game manager. You really wonder who's going to be the QB of Michigan coming into the year. And if you have questions at quarterback, offensive line, and everybody's gunning for you because you're defending national champs, plus they have to play on the road this year, Ohio State. They also have to play at home, Texas. They play Oregon at home. I think Michigan probably loses 2 or 3 games this year. Still a good team, but not up to last year's standards.
All right, there's a look at Ohio State, Michigan, and the Big Ten here on the R&R podcast with our very special guest, Phil Steele. We'll get a break in right now. When we come back, we'll take a look at the rest of the country and how Phil sees the other teams and where they stack up in the SEC. Is that it? There's just 2 conferences, right? There's the Big Ten and the SEC. So we'll get into that and whatever else we can tackle when we return on the R&R podcast.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of the Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tybus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, everybody. Always want to tell you about our good friends at Cleveland Party Rentals. They're your go-to for memorable events and parties. Now, their approach is very simple. As I've been telling you, they treat your event as exactly as if it were their very own. So they're going to help you alleviate all the stress of the event coordination that you so often get. This way, you see, you can savor the moments that matter. They're dedicated to offering you pricing that's clear and completely free from hidden fees, and that's coupled with one of the most robust cancellation policies in the industry in case maybe you get a change in plans, right? That happens once in a while. They have a tailgate package I want to tell you about. You can lock in your games for the season or even put your Super Bowl party together in the summer so you're ready to go in February. Here's what you get. High-quality outdoor screen and projector with immersive sound, double bowl frozen drink machine, a popcorn machine, 2-tap beer jockey box. You get a front row seat. Everybody gets that. It allows you to unleash the ultimate entertainment experience. That game day bundle I just told you about, I know you heard me. It's a complete package that transforms your backyard into a cinematic and gaming paradise. Here's the best part. Ready for this now? Get ready to write this down. Listeners, all of our Reghi Roda podcast listeners, use code CLEPartiesRock. I'll spell that for you. CLEPARTIESROCK for 10% off your booking. Do it now at Cleveland Party Rentals.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey gang, the Roadman Kenny Roda here from the R&R podcast. If you've been in an accident, first of all, I hope you're okay. Secondly, if you are and your car's not, then guess what? You need to look no further than Newark Auto Body and Zanesville Auto Body. Why? They're safe, they're reliable, their collision repairs are what they do best. It's their business. They are located in Newark and in Zanesville, and they are a local family-run and veteran-owned business serving those areas, Newark, Zanesville, and the surrounding areas. And how about this? They work with all the insurance providers to make your experience hassle-free. We're already down in the dumps because your car is dinged up, right? You don't need a hassle from the insurance company. That's the other great thing about them. Plus, you can ask about their special discounts for U.S. military veterans. You want to check them out online? Here's where you go. autobodyofnewark.com or autobodyofzanesville.com. And to get your repair started today, instead of checking them out online, pick up the phone, do it the old-fashioned way. Call 740-899-4111 and tell them Reghi Roda sent you.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sable.
And I'm Scott Sable, and we're hosts of the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
We continue with the Reghi Roda podcast powered by Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Thrilled to have with us the man who writes the Bible, as I call it, for college football, the preseason Bible, and that is Phil Steele. The magazine is out, and you can get it online and in a couple of places if you're out shopping. We'll tell you about that here in a little bit. But, Michael, we talked about the Big Ten with Phil. He's got Georgia as his number one team, Reg, and I'm curious, were you surprised that Phil had Georgia number one, or are you kind of on the same page with the man?
I'm on the same page with Phil. Not that we conversed about it, but I figured that Phil's going to either go Georgia or Ohio State. All right, Phil. So give us the lowdown. As we know, I think Georgia last few years, if they lose a football game, it's like everybody throws their hands up. It's like, what the hell is going on with Kirby Smart? He lost with the Georgia Bulldogs. They've been that good. Do they continue with the just atmospheric winning ways again this year? And we know they're going to work their way into this expanded college football playoff, but are they the SEC champs once again?
Yeah, first of all, I think if Georgia had made the playoff last year, they lost, they had an undefeated season, lost to Alabama in the SEC title game. I think if Georgia had made the playoff last year, they might have won the national title because they really have the job that Kirby Smart is doing, accumulating talent here. I mean, I could go to their third team defensive line and come up with a guy who would start for a lot of other SEC teams. I could go to their third team linebacker and come up with a guy who would start for other SEC teams. Go to their third team defensive backs. This team is just absolutely loaded top to bottom at every position. And they lose some running backs from last year, but they bring in Trevor Etienne from Florida, and they're so deep at running back, it's ridiculous. They lose the John Mackey Award winner at tight end and Brock Bowers. They've got Oscar Delp to take his place. They've got the best offensive line in the country, and they've got a veteran quarterback in Carson Beck. And Carson Beck last year was in his first year as a starter. And early in the year, they gave him a short leash. They didn't really take a lot of chances. We saw Carson Beck get better as the season went on. And I think you're going to see Carson Beck really bloom this year. In fact, he's a Heisman front runner. Now, Georgia's schedule ain't easy. They have to play Bama on the road, Texas on the road, and they also play Ole Miss on the road. That's 3 top 10 teams on the road. They may slip up once during the regular season, but I'm not playing Georgia in the postseason. And I think they're the best team, the most talented team, the deepest team in the country.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on any of that, Phil. I would like to ask you, though, I'm really intrigued by Steve Sarkisian and his Texas Longhorns. How do you assess them this year? Are they a squad that can potentially win a national championship? They go to Michigan in week 2, and of course, then have the normal with Oklahoma, Georgia, playing Florida and Kentucky at home, Texas A&M on the road. But is Quinn Ewers the real deal enough to give Steve Sarkisian's football team a shot to win it all?
Yeah, they've got the best quarterback room in the country. Not only do they have Quinn Ewers as the starting QB, they got Arch Manning as the backup. And Arch Manning looked really good in the spring. Looked like that number 1 quarterback out of high school. And then they also have Trey Owens, And Trey Owens looked really good in the spring as well. So they're extremely deep at quarterback. They've got 3 really talented guys they can win with. And the knock on Texas, I would say 3 years ago, if I had a knock on Texas, it was the strength of the line play, the offensive defensive line. That is corrected. They have my number 2 rated offensive line in the country, my number 18 rated defensive line. Now they lose 2 really good defensive tackles in Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, but they've got good replacements coming in. The ends are solid. Linebackers great. DB's great. They have my number 2 special teams in the country. They have a better schedule than Georgia. They get Georgia at home. And it wouldn't surprise me, Michael. Check this out. Texas plays Georgia in the regular season. They play each other again in the SEC championship game, which I'm forecasting. They play each other again in the playoffs. No team ever played played 3 times in a single year. It could happen this year with Texas and Georgia. How would you like that?
That'd be
Love
pretty
it.
crazy.
It's definitely a distinct possibility. Love both of those football teams. Definitely. Kenny, go ahead.
No, I was just curious. You mentioned the quarterback room. Are we looking at a Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts situation potentially, in Texas where they start with one and maybe finish with another?
I don't think that's the case this year. I'll go back to, remember Clemson a couple years ago? They had Trevor Lawrence as the backup heading into the year. Took him a couple games to win the starting job. Quinn Ewers is the starting quarterback there. And the thing I love about Arch Manning, he's patient. He's not threatening to jump ship. And this is the era of the transfer portal, isn't it, guys? That doesn't happen. But Arch Manning knows he's one play away from being the starter, knows he's 1 year away from being the starting quarterback at Texas. And he's patient. He's willing to wait there. Trey Owens is there. They all love competition. But I think Quinn Ewers is your man all year long.
All right.
Phil Steele joining us, the very best. No question about it. Kenny, didn't mean to jump you there. Sorry,
no,
man.
you're good.
I just wanted Phil to go ahead and, Phil, one more time, give us how all of our R&R podcast listeners can get Phil Steele's college football preview 2024 that's hot on the presses and waiting for them.
Now, first of all, I enjoy talking to you guys so much. I don't know why we don't do this more often, for starters. But
we can. You're too busy. It's difficult.
Not for you. Not for my good buddies, Michael and Kenny. Come on. Anyway, where you get the magazine, you go to the 2 exclusive places this year. Don't waste your gas money looking around for it. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million are the only 2 places. Plenty of copies in store right now, but get them before they sell out. And you can also order it online at philsteele.com. And once again, if you order at philsteele.com, it's more expensive because we charge you for the shipping, but we give you the digital magazine absolutely free. And the digital magazine's all the way updated through September. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, both are local here in the area, and also at philsteele.com. But yeah, guys, why don't we do this more often?
Let's absolutely, Phil. Yes, I mean,
man. Right now, what do you think about maybe at the halfway point of the college and NFL season? As Phil, Phil can break it down and assess it for us on the NFL side too. So, Roadman, what do you think? Maybe Phil in mid-October?
I'd like him even more often, Reggie, now that gambling's legal in the Buckeye State, because I need to do better this year if I'm going to use all my apps and win some of that money back I lost last year. So whenever we can get Phil on as many times as we can, you're going to get 2 thumbs up from me.
How about that, Phil? Rhoda has found the gambling apps. Look out now. Look out, world.
Hey, we could do a Mac preview one of these times here in August.
Sure. Absolutely.
Michael Red Guy's Mr. Mac.
Well, I don't know about that, but real quick, Toledo and Miami. Those are the 2 I think are the you don't have to break it all down, but those are the 2 that I think might be. This is a whole new deal in the Mid-American Conference now. Gone are the divisions, East, West. So it's a whole new deal. But I like both Toledo and Miami as the 2 best.
Yeah, I agree. Toledo and Miami are the 2 best, and the 2 teams to watch for this year. Northern Illinois, where Coach Hammock told me they've got like 29 seniors. He's never had a team with this many seniors. And then Bowling Green, let me tell you a quick story about Bowling Green and Scott Loeffler. His first year at BG, he said, Phil, here's the plan. First year, we're going to suck. The second year, we're going to suck less. The third year, we're going to compete. And then he laid it right out. And if not for 2020, he'd be completely on schedule right now. I think they are a legitimate contender in the MAC this year. Keep your eyes on BG.
I know
We
my
love Scott Leffler too, Kenny. Barberton Magic. Remember
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Leffler played his
absolutely.
high school football in Barberton, then played it as a Michigan Wolverine. But I agree with Phil. I think he's doing a hell of a job, and they got a shot with his Bowling Green Falcons this year.
I know my partner, one of my partners on our high school football broadcast on WHBC Radio, Mark Miller, will be happy to hear that. Former BG Falcon, Iziggy Zumba. He'll love hearing that they're on the right track. Wait till I see him and give him that information that Reghi and Steele said, watch out for your Falcons this year. He'll be pumped up, guys.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Hey Phil, again, let's kind of put this down, mark it in pencil, but it'll get put in pen. How about we think about in the first week or two in October?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you
Anything
think?
you guys
We'll
want.
get that. We'll get that done, and that we at least a couple of times during the season we'll have you on here on R&R. Because, and again, if you just call either one of us and say I want to come on. Rhoda and I are big admirers of what you do, so you have carte blanche, buddy. Whenever you want to come on, you come on with us.
I appreciate that very much, and it's very always enjoyable whenever I get to talk to you two.
Hey, last thing, and we'll let you get out of here, Phil. With this new playoff system in college football, how do you like it, and how do you see this breaking down this year as we go through an entirely new playoff system with bigger conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC and everything?
You know, Kenny, I've always been a 14 playoff guy, and then came last year. And last year, I think Florida State and Georgia both deserve to be in the playoffs. So
Yeah.
now that we're going to 12, my concern is, at the FCS, sometimes it's the healthiest team that wins the title at the end of the year. I don't want that to happen. I don't want teams to play too many games and it's whoever's healthiest is the best. I also don't want to see games at the end of the season be de-emphasized because you're going to make the playoff. But right now, coming off of last year, I'm all for the 12-team playoff. Let's go see how it works.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well, and we'll see if the Buckeyes and Ryan Day, if he can keep his job and get a chance at winning a national championship. If not, does Georgia get back on top? Can Oregon climb the mountain? Is Texas a team out there? Or how about this? One sleeper team to watch out for, Phil. We mentioned maybe your top five there with Penn State in at number 5. Give us a sleeper team to watch out for as far as maybe making a run in those playoffs.
Yeah, let me give you a non-top 10 team that I think has a shot, and that's Utah. Now, Utah last year was 8-5, and you're thinking, well, how is that a national title contender? But remember the 2 years prior, they played in the Rose Bowl both years, and I think had Cam Rising stayed healthy, they had a shot at winning both those games against Ohio State and Penn State. Now, this year, I go back to last year for a minute, Utah is not as good on the road as they are at home. And last year, they had to play Oregon State, USC, Washington, and Arizona, all on the road. This year, all the tough games are at home, and they're almost unbeatable in Rice-Eccles Stadium. Every year I talk to Kyle Whittingham. He loves their offensive line, and he loves it again this year. He loves their defensive line, and he loves it again this year. Now they've got Cam Rising back. And last year, not only did Cam Rising get injured, but Brandon Rose, their backup quarterback, who can do dangerous passer, dangerous runner, he was injured in August. So they had to go to a third-string quarterback last year. Teams could stack the box on him. You can't do that this year. They've got one of their best receiving cores, a dynamic offensive line. Cam Rising, Sam Hurd comes in, Brandon Rose is back, and Utah's moving from the Pac-12, which was one of the best conferences in college football last year, to the Big 12. I see Utah with the potential to run the table, and once they get into the postseason, watch out for Kyle Whittingham.
Love that stuff. And we could talk to Phil for another 2 hours, right, guy? But he's got other things to do right now. So we'll let him go here.
Yeah, absolutely. But Phil, again, always appreciate your knowledge, your insight, everything you do for college football. You're the best. Nobody even comes close. And again, we'll keep pumping up Phil Steele's college football preview magazine here for this 24 season. And in just a short amount of time, Phil, the football will be flying in the air. And like we said, we'll get you back on as we approach midseason in college football. How's that sound?
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it, guys. Always a lot of fun talking football with you two. Always an interesting conversation.
Thank you, Phil Steele. You're the best. Appreciate you.
You are.
Kenny? Nobody does it better than him. I mean, I've known him for a long, long time, but he is Absolutely phenomenal. And Kenny, there's times even, I think you and I feel like, pretty knowledgeable about. There are times I get into conversations with Phil. It's like, damn, I got to look because I wasn't aware of that, something that he's telling me. So, the very best. So make sure you take a look for Phil Steele's 24 College Football Preview Magazine. You will not be disappointed. Get us to break, Road Man.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Rick. I'm already on my apps. All right, Big Ten. He said Ohio State in the Big Ten. He likes Utah in the Big 12. So I just let's see. Can I parlay? It says legs cannot be combined. Come on, let me parlay these conference championship winners. Thanks to Phil Steele out. I got to find another app that'll let me parlay those things, Ray Guy. That's what I want to do. I don't want to forget that information.
Attaboy. Make sure you do. We're going to be following your gaming this season, Roadman.
Yeah, like I said, hopefully I do. I guarantee I'll do better than I did last year. How much better? I don't know. So it's a work in progress, as we like to say. All right,
understood. I'm down with that. I think you will. You picked up some knowledge from a season ago that you'll utilize this year to make yourself grab more of that green cash.
Let's hope so. No question about it. Thanks again to Phil Steele for joining us. He's simply the best, and we look forward to having him back on here on the Reghi Roda podcast. Shout out to Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body for their sponsorship of this on the Press Play Podcast Network, and to our producer, Ty Cordts, who gets this all out to you so you can find it wherever you get your podcast. And make sure you subscribe to the Press Play Podcast Network so whenever we come up with something new, you are alerted to it and you get it at your earliest convenience. Michael, we'll do this again real soon, and looking forward to chatting with Phil throughout the year.
Absolutely. Again, nobody does it better than Phil Steele. We certainly want you to take advantage of everything that he offers. But Roadman, always fun. And look forward to our next edition of the Reghi Roda podcast. Good stuff, buddy.